They told him to stand down, to take the envelope, keep his mouth shut, and let the plane leave without questions. But when Sergeant Benedict Rowe stepped onto the tarmac that night and saw who was boarding, he knew it wasn't just a royal retreat. It was a smuggling operation. No manifest, no crown seals, and crates sealed tight under a foreign registry. With Camilla and her son mocking the late Queen's dusty tiaras and locked-up legacy. But when Rowe forced one of those crates open and saw Queen Elizabeth's coronation jewels packed for black market export, he made a choice. He stood his ground, fought off the bribes, survived the threats, and when King Charles arrived, he watched him point directly at his wife and give a single final command: arrest her. Before we show you how one royal guard exposed the smuggling plot that nearly stole the crown's most sacred treasures, make sure you're subscribed with the bell icon turned on, and drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from. Because what nearly flew out of the country that night wasn't just any jewellery, it was the Queen's legacy. Heathrow's Royal Terminal sat half-lit in the mist, tarmac a black mirror reflecting yellow runway stripes and blinking red tail lights. Inside the quiet service wing, Sergeant Benedict Rowe adjusted the white belt on his Coldstream tunic and checked his watch again. 22:03. He wasn't supposed to be here, at least not according to the roster he'd been handed that morning, a routine perimeter shift at Wellington Barracks. But just after noon, his phone buzzed. Unlisted number. A voice he didn't recognise said he'd been reassigned at the request of the palace and was to report to Heathrow's Royal Security checkpoint for a confidential evening assignment. No elaboration. No orders in writing. Now he stood beside two other guardsmen and a small team of security contractors who looked more like mercenaries than MOD personnel. No insignia. Blank epaulets. Earpieces tucked into their collars, and enough tension in their stance to make him wonder who they expected or feared. Across the room, another guard, Collins, leaned in and muttered with a grin, "Word is tonight's hush money's better than New Year's overtime." Rowe frowned. Hush money? You'll see. Collins glanced toward a clipboard-carrying supervisor who hadn't made eye contact with any of them all night. No inspections, no questions. Planes pre-cleared. Just hold the rope line and look impressive. Something shifted in Rowe's gut. He'd done this long enough to know that when even the guards start whispering about envelopes, it's not just a night shift, it's a cover. A grey-uniformed operations officer approached the detail moments later. Listen up. You've been seconded tonight to ceremonial escort duties. Temporary manifest. You're not here to interfere with logistics or ask questions about cargo. Just maintain perimeter posture until the aircraft departs. Rowe raised his hand slightly. Is this tied to a Privy Council directive? The officer didn't blink. You'll be briefed as necessary. Just do your job, Sergeant. The others barely reacted, already returning to their posts with the casual indifference of men who'd been told to keep quiet, and perhaps rewarded for it. Rowe didn't move. Something was off. There were no Windsor seals on the manifest he'd glanced at earlier, no MOD consignment logs, and, most telling of all, no listed passenger names, just private royal charter, routed under a logistics firm based in Gibraltar. He watched a forklift angle toward the runway, carrying velvet-lined crates toward the jet being refueled on the far end of the tarmac. He didn't need to see inside the containers to know. This wasn't ceremonial, it wasn't clearance, and it was smuggling, and someone had decided the best way to get it out of the country was to wrap it in a flag and trust that no one in red would dare look twice. Rowe straightened his tunic, eyes narrowing. They had chosen the wrong man for silence. He didn't see who slipped the envelope into his locker, but when he returned from a brief perimeter check, it was there, resting atop his folded gloves like a formality, pale cream, thick stock, sealed with no markings, not even his name. He didn't open it, not yet. His grandfather's voice surfaced in his mind, unbidden. Royal Navy, Falklands veteran, a man who'd spent 30 years watching officers turn blind eyes to convenient shipments. The moment they pay you to look away, lad, the old man had said over tea one winter morning, is the moment you stop being a guard. You become a doorman, and doormen don't protect anything. They just hold the door while history walks out. Rowe had been 17 then. Hadn't understood. He understood now. Across the terminal lounge, the other guards sat more relaxed than usual, helmets resting on their knees, jokes exchanged in low tones. None of them looked concerned. If anything, they looked like men who'd already decided the night would be easy. No protocol, no checks, no resistance. One of the private contractors sidled up beside Rowe, nodding toward the runway. "Looks like rain won't let up," he muttered, in a tone that didn't match the words. "Best to stay dry, eh, Sergeant?" Rowe didn't answer. The man's accent was clipped, not local. Military background, Eastern European maybe. His jacket bore no rank, no tag, but his hands were too still, posture too clean. "You've done your share of assignments, haven't you?" the man continued. "You know how things work off the books. Royals don't always want cameras. Sometimes discretion is loyalty." Rowe met his gaze. Discretion and silence aren't the same. A faint smirk. "Think of it as courtesy. You do your part. Nothing gets messy. Everyone goes home a little wealthier." He gave a half nod and drifted back toward the aircraft. Rowe waited until the man was out of sight, then slipped into the corner locker room. He peeled the envelope open. Inside, £3,000 in crisp, sequential bills, and nothing else. No note, no instruction, just the implication. Rowe sat for a moment, staring at the open locker door. The last time someone offered him silence for money, he'd been in Helmand, watching an Afghan contractor load crates of surplus ammo into a NATO-marked truck bound for the black market. He'd reported it. The next week, 2 of his recommendations were quietly withdrawn, and his transfer request was buried. But he'd never taken the envelope. This time he had, not to keep it, but to know who else had. He tucked the envelope back into his pack and zipped it shut. If they were buying silence, there had to be something worth hiding, and no amount of red tunic, parade formation, or polished ceremony could justify looking away. On his way out, he passed Collins again. The man was already grinning. "Looks like someone finally grew a spine," Collins joked, clapping his shoulder. "Easy night ahead, eh?" Rowe gave a slow nod, playing along. "Yeah, quiet as the grave." But his eyes never left the jet being loaded, or the velvet crates that gleamed under floodlights. Something buried in those boxes didn't belong to the people putting them on that plane. And before the night was over, someone was going to answer for it. The private jet taxied in with no fanfare. No flag on the tail, no palace crest. Just a dull silver fuselage with black-tinted windows and a discreet Chambers Holdings logo on the undercarriage, a name Rowe had never seen tied to any royal logistics before. As the plane slowed to a halt, the hangar doors hissed wider and a small black SUV rolled up beside it. The moment it stopped, 2 aides jumped out, one holding a clipboard, the other clutching a radio he didn't seem to know how to use. They whispered with the contractors, gesturing to the crates already positioned near the cargo ramp. Then the doors opened. First came Thomas Parker Bowles, draped in a tailored tan coat, collar popped, cigarette hanging lazy between 2 fingers. He barely looked at the guards as he stepped onto the wet tarmac, muttering to one of the aides, "Make sure it's all logged under the wellness fund. If anyone asks, it's spar equipment." Behind him, descending with even less urgency, came Camilla. No tiara, no velvet, just a long charcoal cloak that swirled with the wind and a face painted in subtle disdain. Platinum hair styled to perfection, gloves already on. She didn't nod, didn't wave. She walked as though the runway existed solely to accommodate her steps. The moment she caught sight of the guards in position, particularly Rowe, she slowed, lips curling. "Still posting statues at the gate, I see," she said to no one in particular. Thomas chuckled. "Look at them. So serious. Don't they know the Queen's already dead?" Camilla turned slightly, letting her eyes glide down Rowe's uniform with surgical contempt. All that ceremony for a woman who hoarded jewels like relics and did nothing with them. Thomas added. They'd rather keep them locked in glass boxes at Windsor than let someone who understands their value put them to use. Camilla smiled at that, a cold, private thing. Elizabeth loved her secrets, but she forgot. Secrets age poorly. Rowe didn't flinch, but his jaw tightened. They weren't just smuggling, they were desecrating. He didn't expect reverence from politicians, but from the woman who now bore the Queen Consort title. To mock Queen Elizabeth's memory while walking past Crown Guards. That was no longer just arrogance, it was contempt. The crates were loaded swiftly, 6 in total, velvet-wrapped, corner-reinforced. No documentation, just the assumption that nobody in a red coat would dare interrupt. But Rowe stood straighter, eyes tracking every box. He saw what the others didn't. Camilla wasn't moving heirlooms. She was erasing history and turning it into cash. Sergeant Benedict Rowe waited until the last crate hit the ramp. Then he stepped forward, boots clicking sharp against the slick concrete, his voice level but clear as a bell under the hangar roof. "Ma'am?" He addressed Camilla directly. "Before boarding completes, I'm required to verify cargo contents in accordance with Crown's Security Directive 3A. Everything stopped. The contractors froze, eyes flicking to one another. The aides lowered their radios. Even Thomas paused mid-puff, his cigarette trembling slightly in the drizzle. Camilla turned toward Rowe like he'd just barked at her in Latin. "Excuse me." Rowe didn't waver. Unverified shipment. No Privy Council seal. No palace registry. "The directive applies, ma'am." Thomas scoffed. "That directive's for couriers, not royals. It applies to all Crown-affiliated outbound transport," Rowe said, "especially when listed under foreign registries." Camilla took a single step closer. Her voice dropped to something colder than the wind. "You think you outrank the Queen Consort, Sergeant?" Rowe met her eyes without flinching. "I serve the Crown, ma'am, not the carrier." Thomas barked a laugh. "You hear that? We've got a philosopher in boots." Camilla didn't smile. She moved in, slow, until the damp edge of her cloak brushed Rowe's left boot. "You think you're protecting something?" she whispered. "A legacy? A woman buried in stone? Let me explain what you're actually doing." She leaned closer. "You're standing between power and what it's already claimed." Rowe's tone didn't shift. "What it steals, ma'am." Thomas stepped beside her now, his usual flippancy burned off. "You've had your little speech. Now back down before someone files a mental evaluation." Rowe didn't move. Camilla snapped her fingers, and 2 contractors stepped forward. One reached for his radio. The other's hand hovered near his belt. Not a weapon, but a baton holster, not ceremonial. Camilla spoke low, venom slicing through the formality. "You stand down right now, Sergeant, or I will personally ensure your regiment is stripped of royal patronage. No colours, no parades, no funding, nothing. I will dismantle you brick by brick until you're standing alone on a sidewalk in Surrey with a badge that no longer opens gates." Rowe's hands never moved, but his voice sharpened. "That's not your authority to revoke." "Isn't it?" she sneered. "Do you even know who signs your ceremonial appointments?" "I do," Rowe said. "And I also know who protected the Queen's vaults before you even knew which fork to use at dinner." Her face twitched, a crack in the mask. And that was when Rowe knew he'd struck bone. "You've made a mistake tonight," Camilla said, voice trembling not with fear, but with fury. Rowe gave the faintest nod. "Yes, ma'am. Someone has." The rain came harder now, hammering the steel roof of the hangar like a warning shot. Camilla turned sharply on her heel. "Load the final crate." A contractor moved to obey. Rowe stepped into his path. "That cargo is under royal embargo. You load it. You're complicit." The man hesitated, looked to Thomas. Thomas flicked his cigarette into the puddles and snarled, "Move him!" The first blow came fast, not from Camilla's men, but from behind. Another guard, one who'd accepted the envelope, shoulder-checked Rowe hard in the ribs. Rowe staggered, breath knocked sideways, but caught himself on a crate corner. Before he could rise, one of the contractors surged forward. The scuffle broke open like thunder. Rowe drove his elbow back into the man's gut, pivoted and swept low. Classic barracks close-quarters maneuver, grounded in muscle memory. He wasn't fighting to win. He was fighting to stop that crate from crossing the ramp. The contractor went down hard, groaning. A second grabbed Rowe by the collar. Rowe twisted, breaking the grip, and slammed the man against the cargo lift. The guard who'd hit him earlier drew his baton. "You've lost the plot, Rowe. We're just here to look the other way." "You already did," Rowe growled. "That's why I can't." And then, amid the chaos, Rowe spun toward the final crate. Its lid had been loosened in the scuffle. One hinge bent, gold clasp split. Rowe wedged his hand inside and wrenched it open fully. The hanger went silent. Inside, resting on royal velvet, sat Queen Elizabeth II's coronation tiara, unmistakable even to untrained eyes. Surrounding it were sapphire brooches, pearl-strung chokers, and a gold pendant shaped like a Tudor rose, all of it catalogued, museum-sealed, and presumed permanently interred in Windsor's vaults. Rowe stepped back from the open case. Nobody spoke. Even Thomas seemed to have forgotten his script. Behind the crates, Collins had gone pale. The grin had vanished. He looked from the tiara to Rowe, then to the envelope tucked in his own jacket pocket, the one he'd accepted without question. His hand moved toward it, then stopped. For the first time that night, his eyes held something other than casual indifference. Shame. "Jesus," Collins breathed. That's actually hers." One of the contractors, the Serbian, took a step back from the cargo ramp. His jaw worked like he wanted to say something, but military discipline kept him quiet. Still, his hand dropped from his radio. He wasn't intervening anymore. Whatever they were paying him, it wasn't enough for this. Camilla broke the silence. She stepped forward, her face pale but hard as marble, and looked down at the heirlooms as if they were fruit gone sour. "All that for a pile of trinkets," she muttered. Rowe stared at her, stunned. Camilla's voice rose, icy and vicious. "Do you know how many vaults she had? How many pieces she hoarded under marble floors while the monarchy rotted above ground?" She turned to the others now, voice like venom on velvet. "Let the historians cry. Let the museums whine. These jewels were wasted on a woman who died with more titles than teeth." Rowe's knuckles whitened around the edge of the crate. Camilla didn't care. "They were meant for power," she said, "and that's exactly where they're going. Dubai, Geneva, Zurich. The highest bidder wins, and the late Queen's shrine becomes useful for once." Rowe looked at the guards behind her, but no one moved. He stepped in front of the crate, standing tall. "Not tonight." Thomas Parker Bowles had always been more mouth than muscle, but now, face flushed and twitching, he marched toward Rowe like a drunk at a funeral. "You absolute nobody," he spat, jabbing a finger into Rowe's chest. "You think this costume gives you authority? That your little hat makes you more royal than us?" Rowe didn't respond. Thomas shoved him, hard. Rowe took a single step back, but didn't raise a hand. "You think this is about a necklace," Thomas shouted. "It's a new monarchy now. Not one run by shrines and silence. This family is done dressing up for tradition." Behind him, the contractors closed ranks again, circling the crates. The rest of the guards stood frozen. Some looked ashamed, others simply afraid. Camilla's voice rang out across the hangar, rich with venom. "Tradition? Please, the old bat spent 70 years building castles out of fairy tales. Look where that got her, buried under stone while the world changed around her." She swept her arm toward the crates. "You think these jewels mean something? They're dead weight, locked away while the real world trades futures and oil. We're just unlocking them." She turned slowly toward the line of silent guards. "Every one of you standing there in red. Your museum pieces. Costumed compliance. A tribute to a crown that never paid you what you were worth." Rowe had heard enough. He stepped forward, chest rising with every breath, and reached into the crate. He held the coronation tiara high above his head, light catching on its diamond filigree, refracting like a beacon across the soaked concrete. "They aren't yours to sell," Rowe said. "They never were." Camilla's eyes narrowed. "You're going to regret that." "I'd regret silence more." For a moment the only sound was the echo of rain against steel. Then one of the contractors moved again, slowly this time, hand brushing against his jacket. Rowe's free hand dropped to his belt. He didn't draw, didn't threaten, just signalled that he wouldn't stand still this time. The tension in the hangar became a rope pulled taut. Camilla sneered. "You're alone, Sergeant." "I'm not," he said. "I'm just first." Thomas laughed bitterly. "This is treason, you know that. Laying hands on a Queen Consort, blocking a royal charter. You'll be court-martialed, erased." Rowe locked eyes with him. "Not before the truth is logged." He turned slowly and walked the tiara back to the crate. Gently he set it down in the velvet, right where it belonged. Then he reached into his tunic sleeve and pressed the second button on his comm cuff, the one he'd never used in 10 years of service. The silent beacon. High-level distress. Royal tampering suspected. Evidence confirmed. The signal didn't flash, didn't beep. But somewhere on the edge of the tarmac, it was already being heard. The distant groan of engines pulled every head toward the hangar mouth. A black Range Rover Defender crept into view, headlights low against the sheets of rain. No sirens, no escort. Just a single vehicle crawling across the tarmac like a final judgment. It stopped 10 yards from the crates. The driver stepped out first, tall, uniformed, silent. He opened the rear door without a word. For a moment, nothing happened. Just rain and distant runway lights, and the collective held breath of everyone in that hangar. Even Camilla had gone still, watching that open door like it might swallow her whole. Then a polished black shoe touched wet concrete. King Charles emerged. No medals, no pageantry, just a long black coat, the collar folded up against the wind, and his expression unreadable beneath the terminal lights. He didn't speak at first, just looked, first at the guards, then at the crates, then at his wife. Camilla was the first to move. She stepped forward with exaggerated calm, her voice suddenly honeyed. "Darling, this has gotten completely out of hand." "Your guard has confused protocol with insubordination." Charles didn't answer. She pressed on. "We were merely transporting family heirlooms." "Unregistered, yes, but hardly unprecedented. And this man," she pointed toward Rowe, "has accused us of criminality, of theft, of—" her voice cracked with mock injury, "disgracing your legacy." Rowe stood firm, back straight. He stepped forward once. "Your Majesty," he said, projecting calmly, "with respect, what she was transporting was not inheritance. It was heritage. Crown property, sealed under Privy Council Order 9A, marked for permanent retention inside Windsor Vault C. She removed it without chain of custody. No diplomatic clearance, no manifest." He opened the nearest crate again, just slightly, revealing the unmistakable sparkle of the coronation tiara beneath the velvet fold. Charles stepped closer. He looked inside. When he turned back, his face had changed, not dramatically, but the air around him hardened. He turned to Thomas. "And you?" Thomas looked panicked for the first time. "It was administrative. Quiet reallocation, for insurance purposes, nothing illegal." Rowe reached into his coat and pulled a second envelope, the one he'd received. He held it out to the king. Charles opened it, saw the money. Nothing else. The king looked at Camilla. "What were you planning to do?" Camilla's calm cracked. "Use it," she hissed. "Unlike her. Unlike your mother, who locked it all away for no one to touch. For museums. For tourists. I intended to restore its value." She spat the word like poison. Charles inhaled slowly. Then he spoke, not loudly, but with something deeper than command. "Enough. This ends now." Camilla stiffened. "You wouldn't dare." Something shifted in her eyes then. Not fear exactly, but the dawning realization that the game she'd been playing had always had rules she didn't write. Her breath quickened. hands curled into fists inside her gloves. "Charles, listen to me. Your mother was a relic. Beautiful, yes. Dutiful, certainly. But she was paralyzed by sentiment. She preserved when she should have leveraged. I was trying to—" "Steal," Charles said flatly. The word landed like a door slamming shut. Camilla's composure shattered. "How dare you? How dare you reduce this to—" Her voice cracked. "I have done everything for this family. Everything. I stood beside you when no one else would. I rebuilt your image. I made you legitimate after Diana." Charles's expression went colder than stone. "Don't." But Camilla was past restraint now. "You think you can discard me like some chambermaid caught with silver? I am the Queen Consort." "Not any more," Charles said quietly. The silence that followed was absolute. Charles wasn't looking at her anymore. He looked at Rowe. "Sergeant, prepare to carry out arrest." For a beat, no one moved. Then Sergeant Benedict Rowe stepped forward, the rain sheeting off his bearskin hat, scarlet tunic gleaming wet under the floodlights. His voice was clear, official, cold. "By sovereign authority and under order of the Crown, Camilla Rosemary Parker Bowles," he paused only to look her in the eye, "you are under arrest for the unauthorized removal, trafficking, and attempted smuggling of protected Crown property." Camilla didn't flinch. She stared at Rowe like she wanted to bite through his throat. "You worthless puppet," she snapped. "You think this will stand? You think the papers won't protect me? I'll have every editor, every cabinet dog, every solicitor in London on speed dial." Rowe didn't speak. He just reached for her wrists. Camilla twisted backward, trying to slap his hand away, but Rowe was quicker. He pivoted, turned her arm, and in one smooth, practiced motion, clamped the silver restraints down around her wrists. Not ceremonial, not symbolic, real, steel. Camilla howled, not in pain, in rage, the kind that comes from someone who has never, in her life, been told no. "You dare!" she hissed. "You absolute stain!" But Rowe was already turning her toward the tarmac. Behind them, the black-suited MOD officers arrived in formation, called in quietly by the same distress beacon Rowe had activated minutes earlier. One by one, they swept the scene, photographing crates, sealing lids, tagging transport chains. No one issued commands. They didn't need to. This wasn't a raid, it was a reclamation. "Secure the aircraft," one officer called. Contractors stepped back immediately, hands raised. They didn't want the smoke. The plane's staircase was dropped and locked. A separate team began peeling back the faux royal markings from the side of the fuselage. The jet's registry was flagged, its access revoked, and its runway departure cancelled without ceremony. The pilot never even stepped off. Thomas saw his opportunity slipping. "You're making a mistake," he shouted, voice cracking. "You're arresting the future of the Crown." Rowe turned, just as MOD officers grabbed Thomas by both arms. "I am the Crown!" Thomas screamed. "I am blood!" Charles finally looked at his stepson with something colder than silence. "No," he said. "Your burden." Thomas's face twisted. "You'll burn for this. You'll burn this whole monarchy down with it." But Rowe was already turning him too, wrist-locked, dragged across the tarmac beside his mother. "Strip the aircraft," the lead MOD officer ordered. "Every crate, every compartment, strip it clean." Behind the cargo ramp, Collins stood frozen, staring at the open crate still gleaming under floodlights. The coronation tiara caught the light like an accusation. He looked at the other guards, men he'd served beside for years, men who'd accepted the same envelopes, made the same quiet bargains. One by one, they began removing their gloves, not in protest, in something heavier, recognition. They'd been bought, and history had nearly been stolen while they looked the other way. No amount of money could rewrite that now. Collins reached into his jacket, pulled out the envelope, still sealed, and let it fall into a puddle at his feet. The bills inside bloomed dark with water. He didn't look at Rowe, couldn't. Charles watched it all unfold, unmoving. Until finally, as Camilla shrieked curses into the night, the king turned to Rowe. "Sergeant?" Rowe paused. Charles spoke quietly. Make sure it all reaches Windsor, untouched. Rowe nodded. Yes, Your Majesty. The jet sat like a carcass under floodlights, its engines powered down, its doors bolted shut. The crest, once printed near the boarding ramp, a stylized gold crown, had already been stripped away, peeled back with gloved hands, and packed into evidence. MOD officers worked methodically, logging each crate, weighing them, photographing serial numbers. Every jewel was re-wrapped in archival velvet. Every tiara logged under Restoration Authority. The entire operation moved like a funeral procession with purpose. Camilla stood off to the side, drenched, silver cuffs digging into her wrists, hair blown flat against her face by the wind. Her cloak clung like dead weight. She didn't speak now, not to anyone. Thomas sat slumped on a steel transport crate, his head in his hands, one cheek already bruised from the earlier scuffle. His shoes had been taken, his socks soaked through. No one pitied them, not even the guards who had once looked the other way. Across the tarmac, Sergeant Benedict Rowe stood beside the final evidence lockbox, the one holding Queen Elizabeth's coronation tiara. He sealed it with a numbered chain, and then turned as King Charles approached alone. The king didn't speak at first, just watched as the armoured MOD convoy loaded the last crate into a black van marked with no emblem. Finally, Charles said, without ceremony, "You've preserved the crown, where I nearly lost it." Rowe, soaked and motionless, gave a quiet nod. "I only served the oath I swore." Charles didn't argue. Behind them, the aircraft was being wheeled into a security hangar. It would never fly again. Not under royal charter, not under any name. Whatever it had once represented, secrecy, protection, power, had been stripped with the paint. And far above it all, the rain kept falling, gentle now, cleansing. Charles turned without another word and walked away toward the waiting defender. Rowe remained still, posture squared, eyes fixed on the plane until the last light inside was shut off. History had nearly left the country that night, but it hadn't, because one guard refused to blink. Should a royal guard have the power to defy bribes and arrest even the Queen Consort when the crown is at risk? And did King Charles do the right thing, siding with a soldier over his own family? Let us know what you think in the comments below. If you believe loyalty should never be bought, and that history belongs to those who protect it, then hit that like button right now. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel with the bell icon turned on, so you never miss what really happens behind palace walls. And don't keep this story to yourself. Share it with someone who still believes the crown should mean something. Our next story is already waiting on your screen. Go watch it now, and we'll see you tomorrow, same time, with a brand new video.